Lesson 11.1 is fairly simple as these complicated lessons go anyway. It definitely gets more complicated as this chapter goes on. So let's start with number 9. It's a pretty simple one term over one term fraction. So we're just going to simplify the coefficients or the numbers first, and then we will simplify the variables second. You can do it at the same time if you want, whatever method works for you. So I'm going to keep 4 as is, and I'm going to keep x to the third or x cubed as is. But down in the denominator, I'm going to change 28 or factor 28 into 4 times 7. And I'm going to factor x to the fourth as x to the third and another x. So altogether, I still have 4 x's. So we're just going to simplify the 4's. Simplify the x cubes. If you notice, I didn't just cross them out. I put 1's for a reason, and that is because in the numerator, I still have a 1. And in the denominator, it gets a little messy if you don't write neatly, so I'm going to circle them for you. I have a 7 and an x left. So my denominator is 7x. So I should have 1 over 7x. The directions ask you to state any excluded values. What that means is that if you remember my poster in class, the number 1 commandment in math is thou shalt not divide by 0. So your denominator cannot be 0. So the number that you could replace x with in the denominator that would make your denominator equal 0 would be 0. So I'm going to write it a little larger and neater up here. My final answer is 1 over 7x, and x cannot equal 0, but it could equal anything else. Let's do one that's a little more complicated. And number 15 looks like a good one. Now, instead of just having a monomial divided by a monomial, we have a binomial divided by a binomial. So for 15, I'm just going to rewrite it over here real quick. 2b minus 8 divided by b squared minus 16. So I can factor the numerator 2b minus 8 into 2 times the quantity of b minus 4. And my denominator, b squared minus 16, that is a difference of 2 squares. So we're looking to come up with something where I can break 16 down into 2 numbers that will equal 16 when I multiply, but then 0 if I subtract them. And that would be 4 and 4. So a factor of b plus 4 and a factor of b minus 4. So if you were to use FOIL or cover up or the box method or whatever it is you use, and you multiplied this all out, you would get b squared here, where I just underline in pink. You would get negative 16 if you multiply the 4 into the negative 4. And then lastly, little smiley is 4b, big smiley is negative 4b. So 4b minus 4b is 0. That's why we don't have a middle term. And now if you look, I have 2 factors that are the same, b minus 4. And since they are exactly the same, I can cross them out because they simplify. Notice I didn't cross out the b's and then the negative 4. They are like a couple. They go together. They both say b minus 4, so the entire set of parentheses simplified. So I'm left with 2 in the numerator, b plus 4 in the denominator. I'm no longer needing the parentheses, so I'm not going to write them down. And then lastly, we need to check to see if every answer would work. Well, remember I said in example 1 that you cannot have a denominator of 0. So what would make this denominator equal 0? Well, that would be if b equaled negative 4. So b cannot equal negative 4. So there's your final answer. 2 divided by b plus 4. B cannot equal negative 4. The last example I'm going to do is number 19. And I chose that one because it's the only one that I see that's an odd number where you have to factor the numerator and the denominator in a pretty complex way. If you're a really good factorer, then it's probably not too complex, but it's been a while, so maybe some of you have forgotten. So I'm going to change the numerator and the denominator into 2 sets of parentheses. And then I'm going to try to figure out, well, how does each one break down? So remember, we start at the back of the problem. So for the numerator, that's a 12. I'm looking for 2 numbers that will multiply to be 12 and will add to be 7. So you could make yourself a little list. Hopefully those numbers are small enough where you recognize right away that that would be 4 and 3. And it does not matter which order you put it in. I'm going to put it the way I said it, which is 4 and 3. And then for the denominator, I'm going to start with the 8. I'm looking for 2 numbers that multiply to be 8 and add to be 6, which is that middle term. Now, a lot of times you can cheat by using what you already figured out in the numerator. I know that 3 does not go into 8, and I know that 4 does. And I know I'm supposed to be simplifying and that my m plus 4s are probably going to cancel out. So I'm just going to think about it. Can I match something with 4 to make 8 and 6? Yes, I can. That would be 2. So 4 times 2 would be the 8. 4 plus 2 would give me the 6 that's in the middle term. If you look, these 2 factors of m plus 4 cancel out and simplify. I am left with a final answer of m plus 3 in the numerator, m plus 2 in the denominator. Remember that you need to state any excluded values. We cannot have m be negative 2 in the denominator because that would make the denominator equal to 0. It doesn't matter about the top. The numerator can be whatever you want, but the bottom cannot equal 0